The cold night and the cry for help. Jack lived alone on a small, quiet planet far away from Earth. The nights there were long and freezing. Wind howled like a beast, and thick white snow covered the ground like a heavy blanket. Jack had gotten used to the cold and the silence. He had no friends, no family, and no visitors. Just his small home, a few tools, and memories he didn't like to talk about. But everything changed one night. It was past midnight when Jack heard a strange sound. It was soft at first, almost like the wind, but then he heard it again. A cry. A weak, broken cry that didn't sound human. Jack's heart skipped. He grabbed his old coat and stepped outside, the cold air hitting his face like ice. He followed the sound into the trees behind his home. His boots crunched the snow, and his breath turned into fog. Then he saw her. She was lying on the ground, barely moving. She had no clothes on. Her skin was pale blue, and her arms were wrapped around herself like she was trying to disappear. Her hair was silver and tangled, her body thin like she hadn't eaten in days. But what struck Jack the most were her eyes, wide, terrified, and filled with pain. She looked young, maybe a teenager. She looked like someone who had given up. Jack froze. He had never seen anything like her before. She was clearly alien, but not dangerous. She didn't try to run. She didn't even speak. She just lay there, shaking. Without thinking, Jack took off his coat and placed it over her. She flinched but didn't resist. Slowly, carefully, he picked her up. She was so light, like holding a bird. He brought her back to his home, placed her gently on the softest bed he had, and covered her in more blankets. She didn't say a word. She just curled up and stared at the wall. Jack made her soup, something warm and simple. She didn't move until he sat beside her and offered a spoon. She opened her mouth slowly, like she was scared it might be a trick. After the first sip, she began eating fast, like someone who hadn't had food in a very long time. Jack didn't ask any questions, not yet. He just watched her, trying to understand. There were so many questions in his mind. Who was she? Where did she come from? Why was she naked in the forest during the coldest night of the year? Was someone chasing her? Was she in danger? She didn't speak. She didn't even try. But her eyes followed him around the room, like she was trying to decide if he was safe. Jack moved slowly, gently, and always stayed where she could see him. He didn't want to scare her more than she already was. That night, he let her sleep in his room while he took the floor near the door. She stayed quiet, but in the middle of the night, Jack woke to the sound of soft crying. Not loud sobs, just little broken sounds. He didn't say anything. He just lay still and listened. Something horrible had happened to her. That much was clear. In the morning, she was awake before him, sitting in the corner of the room, holding the coat he had given her. She didn't look at him this time. Her eyes were empty. Jack made breakfast and placed it near her. She waited until he sat back before she touched it. Jack knew he had a choice. He could take her to the nearest outpost and let someone else deal with her, or he could try to help her himself. But something inside him whispered that she had already seen too many strangers. She didn't need another face that would leave her. So he made his decision. He would help her. He didn't need to know her name. He didn't need to understand her language. He just needed to keep her warm, fed, and safe for now. He would wait. Maybe one day she would trust him. Maybe one day she would tell her story. But for now, she was here, alive. And that was a start. He gave her a blanket, and when he walked past her, she reached out and gently touched his hand. Just once. It was a small moment, but it meant something. Jack looked at her and gave a soft nod. She didn't nod back, but she didn't pull away either. For the first time in years, Jack felt like his lonely house wasn't empty anymore, and somewhere deep inside he knew this girl's story was far from over. It had only just begun, Asterisk, she tries to speak, but only cries the next morning. Jack watched her from across the room. She was still sitting in the same spot, holding the edge of the blanket like it was the only thing she had. Her eyes were open, but they didn't move much. She looked like a statue, quiet, still, and full of pain. Jack didn't say anything. He didn't want to push her. He simply placed a small bowl of warm porridge on the table and stepped away. She didn't move at first, but after a long pause, she slowly walked to the table, picked up the spoon with shaky fingers, and began to eat. Every bite was slow, careful, like she wasn't sure if it was real. She didn't look at Jack. She didn't say a word. But she wasn't hiding from him anymore. That was something. Jack spent the rest of the day fixing small things around the house. He made noise on purpose, gentle noises, not sudden ones. He opened and closed drawers, tapped tools together, and hummed a soft tune under his breath. He wanted her to know that not all sound meant danger, that not all people would hurt her. She followed him with her eyes. That afternoon, Jack brought out a small screen with pictures. He pointed to himself. Jack. Then he smiled and repeated it. Jack, he pointed to her. No answer. He tried again. Jack, he said, touching his chest. Then he pointed to her. She blinked. Her mouth opened slightly, then closed again. Jack smiled gently. It's okay, he said. You don't have to talk. She stared at him. Her eyes began to fill with tears. He didn't understand why until she tried to speak. Her lips moved. Her throat made a sound. But no words came. Just a cracked noise, followed by shaking and gasps. Then she began to cry, not loud, but real. Her small body bent forward, and the tears fell silently onto her hands. Jack didn't move closer. He didn't try to hug her. He simply sat there, letting her cry. Sometimes people needed to let the pain out before they could move forward. He knew that well. That night, she curled up in the bed again, this time on her own. She pulled the blanket over herself and stayed quiet. But she didn't cry. Jack sat by the fire, watching the flames dance. His mind was racing. What had happened to her? Why couldn't she speak? Was it fear? Trauma? Or had someone done something to her voice? Jack had seen things during the war. He had seen prisoners who had been silenced by force, some by pain, some by fear so deep it erased their voices completely. This girl, she had the same look. The next day he brought her a notepad and a pen. He pointed at it, then slowly drew a house. She watched. He then drew a stick figure and wrote Jack under Jack. He pushed the pad toward her. She stared at it, holding the pen like it was strange in her hand. Then, with slow, careful strokes, she drew something. It wasn't clear. Just lines, shapes, a small mark. Then she dropped the pen and pulled her knees to her chest. Jack looked at the drawing. It wasn't a name. It wasn't a word. It was a symbol. Something that looked like a circle with sharp lines around it, almost like a sun, but broken. Jack didn't recognize it. But something about it felt wrong, like it belonged to something cruel. He didn't ask. Not yet. Instead, he took the pad, placed it on the shelf, and smiled softly at her. You don't have to explain, he whispered. You're safe here. That evening, she helped him wash vegetables. Her hands were still shaky, but she didn't drop anything. Once, when their fingers touched, she didn't flinch. Later, while sitting near the fire, she picked up the notepad again and drew a single line like a path. At the end of it, she drew a small figure. A person. Alone. Jack watched her. His heart heavy. She was trying to tell him something. She was alone on a long, hard path. And she had no one. Until now. That night, she surprised him. She walked over to where he was sitting and placed the notepad in his lap. Then, in a voice so soft it almost broke, she whispered just one word. Help. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't loud. But it was real. Jack looked up at her. She wasn't crying anymore. She was shaking, but she was standing. He nodded. Yes, he said. I will help. For the first time, she gave a tiny nod in return. That was the moment Jack knew. This girl was fighting to come back from something terrible, and she had chosen to trust him, even if just a little. The brand on her back. The days passed slowly, but the silence between them began to feel softer. The girl still didn't speak much, but she followed Jack around now. She ate without fear, sat beside him by the fire, and even gave him small nods when he handed her food or clothes. Her presence no longer felt like a shadow. It felt like a question that was beginning to open. One morning, Jack set up a warm bath for her in the back room. The water was clean, and the room was filled with steam. He left her alone with a soft towel and fresh clothes, letting her know through gestures she could take her time. He didn't want to make her feel unsafe. He only wanted her to feel human again, but as he stepped out, something caught his eye. On her back, just for a moment before she turned away, Jack saw a strange mark. It was dark and rough, like it had been burned into her skin. Not a wound, a symbol. A brand. The sight froze him in place. He had seen something like that once, long ago, during the war. Black market traders would burn their ownership marks onto living beings, slaves, lab test subjects, even war captives. It wasn't just cruel. It was a message. That person no longer belonged to themselves. Jack's chest tightened. When the girl came out later, wrapped in clean clothes and drying her silver hair, she looked calm. But Jack's heart was no longer steady. That brand had changed everything. That night, while she was sleeping, Jack quietly pulled out his old military tablet from storage. It was dusty and half broken, but it still worked. He connected to old databases, records of illegal groups, galactic criminals, smuggling codes. He typed in what he had seen: a circle with 3 broken lines through it, like claws cutting across the sun. The result came faster than he expected. The mark belonged to a group called the Vorg Trade Syndicate. They were known for one thing: living cargo. They sold creatures from forbidden planets, kidnapped civilians from weak colonies, and traded rare species for weapons or power. They didn't care about laws. They only cared about control. Jack looked back at the room where the girl was sleeping. That meant she wasn't just lost. She had escaped, and someone might still be looking for her. The next morning, he tried to act normal. He made breakfast. He smiled when she came to the table. But she looked at him differently now, like she could feel the change in the air. Jack pointed gently to her back, then to the notepad. "Does it hurt?" he asked. She lowered her head. Her hand slowly reached for the notepad. She didn't draw this time. She wrote one word: burn. Jack swallowed hard. He could almost feel the pain she must have gone through. He wanted to ask more, but she pushed the notepad back and looked away. It was enough. Later that day, Jack was outside collecting supplies. When he returned, he found her staring at the old military tablet. He hadn't turned it off properly. The screen still showed the symbol, the mark from her back. She was frozen in front of it. Then she screamed. It wasn't loud, but it was sharp and full of terror. She backed away, hands over her face, breathing fast like she couldn't find air. Jack rushed to her and gently knelt beside her. "It's gone," he said calmly. "No more. You're safe here." Her body shook. She didn't speak, but she reached out and grabbed the front of his shirt like a lifeline. Jack held her hand. "I'll never let them take you." That night, she didn't sleep in the room. She sat near the fire, curled up in a ball, clutching the blanket tightly. Jack stayed up with her. And for the first time, she pointed to herself and said a single word: "Sorry." Jack repeated it softly: "Sorry." She nodded. He didn't know what it meant. Maybe it was her name. Maybe it was what others called her. But now she had something of her own. A word. A start. He placed his hand on his chest. Jack. Then he pointed to her. Sorry. She gave the smallest smile. A sad one. But real. Jack knew now that her story was deeper than he had feared. She hadn't just survived pain. She had been owned, hurt, marked like property. And still, she was here. Still breathing. Still trying, and Jack made a promise to himself. He would protect her, not just from the cold, but from the monsters that had burned her past into her skin. Asterisk. The nightmares begin. Sorry no longer cried in front of Jack, but the fear in her eyes had not disappeared. It had simply gone deeper, hiding behind her silence. Jack saw it in the way she jumped at sudden sounds, in how she avoided mirrors, and in the way she never let her back face a door. She was trying to live a normal life, but her mind was still trapped in something far from peace. Jack didn't ask questions. He knew that pushing her would only cause more harm. Instead, he gave her space, time, and gentle care. She helped him around the house, now cooking, cleaning, and even planting small vegetables in the frozen soil. For a moment, things felt quiet, almost normal. But the quiet didn't last. One night, Jack woke to a sound like scratching. He got up and found Sari kneeling near the wall, her fingers dragging across it again and again. Her eyes were open, but she didn't see him. She was whispering something in her own language, fast and frightened. Jack moved slowly. Sorry? He said softly. She didn't respond. When he gently touched her shoulder, she jerked back and screamed. Her voice was full of terror, not anger. It was like she had seen a ghost. She backed into the corner and shook, holding her hands over her ears. Jack sat on the floor, not too close, and waited. After a few minutes, her breathing slowed. She looked at him, her eyes full of tears. Night. Dream, she whispered in broken English. Jack nodded. A nightmare. She gave a small nod, as if that was the word she had been trying to say. From that night forward, the nightmares returned often. Sometimes she would scream in her sleep. Other times she would wake and run to the far corner of the room, her body shaking, unable to speak. Jack began sleeping in a chair near her room, just in case she needed someone. He never tried to touch her without warning. He simply let her know he was there, that she was not alone anymore. One morning, after a long and stormy night, Sari sat silently at the table with her breakfast untouched. Her eyes were fixed on the table. Her hands held a small stick she had found outside. Without saying a word, she began drawing on the wood surface. Jack watched in silence. She drew the same symbol again, the circle with sharp lines. The same mark burned into her back. Then she drew something else, a triangle above it, a shape that looked like a building. Then small dots, figures inside the shape. Jack leaned closer. What is that? He asked. She looked up at him. Her voice was dry, but she spoke. Place. Many. Like me. Jack understood. She was trying to say she wasn't the only one. There were others. Others like her, taken, marked, used. His stomach tightened. He realized the nightmare wasn't just a memory. It was a warning. Her past wasn't behind her. It was still happening to others. That same evening, as Jack checked the old sensors outside, something strange happened. His long-range scanner, silent for months, picked up a trace. A signal. Not strong, but real. He checked the data. It was a small ship. Not a colony supply ship, not a patrol. It was something unregistered. Something silent. Had passed near the edge of the forest the night before. Jack's hands shook slightly. Someone was searching. He ran back inside. Sari was sitting by the fire, clutching the blanket again. She looked at him as if she already knew, as if her body had felt the ship in her sleep. Jack didn't lie. There was a ship, he said. Her hands trembled. He walked over and knelt beside her. "I won't let them take you," he said firmly. "They'll have to go through." She didn't respond with words, but she did something she had never done before. She reached out and took his hand. For a full minute she held it, not shaking. Not scared, just quiet. A silent thank you. Jack looked at the door. The night felt colder. Now, the peace they had was no longer safe. Someone was coming, and they weren't coming to help. Asterisk. They're coming for her. Jack had seen war. He had faced enemies on broken planets and survived battles no one wanted to remember. But nothing made his hands shake like the thought of losing the fragile girl who now sat beside his fire. Sari was no longer just a stranger. She was family. And now someone was coming to take her back. He didn't tell her everything, but she could feel it. Every time the wind passed too fast or a branch snapped outside, her eyes darted to the window. She slept less. She ate less. The fear was returning, and this time it wasn't just in her dreams. Jack activated every defense system he had. Old sensors, motion traps, and warning beacons that hadn't been used in years. He stayed up late, checking the skies. But deep down, he knew they wouldn't come in a loud way. They'd be silent. Quick, like shadows with no name. Then it happened. 1 morning, Jack's radio silent for months crackled with a low voice. "Cold, flat, not human. Return the stolen unit," it said. "You have 3 rotations." Jack stared at the machine, his face hard. Sari heard the voice too. She froze. Her lips moved, but no sound came. She looked at Jack, begging for an answer. "You are not a unit," he said quietly. "You're a person. You're staying." She covered her ears and shook her head. Tears slid down her face. That day, Jack began packing. Not to run, but to be ready. He prepared a hidden place under the house. A shelter made long ago for storms or attacks. He filled it with water, food, and blankets. If he fell, Sari would still have a chance, but she didn't want to hide. That night, she walked up to him and placed her hand on the old rifle mounted on the wall. She pointed at it, then at herself. Jack frowned. "No, you don't need to fight." She shook her head. "I fight," she said. Her voice was rough, but her meaning was clear. She was done running. Jack handed her a small tool instead of a weapon. "If you want to help," he said, "help me set traps." She nodded. Together, they worked late into the night, placing wires through the trees, hiding sharp nets under the snow, setting up light flares that would blind anyone walking too close. Next day was quiet. Too quiet. No message came. No ship flew overhead, but the silence itself felt heavy. Jack barely slept. Sari stood by the window for hours, her eyes watching the forest like a guard. Then came the second night. A soft sound echoed through the trees. A low hum. Jack stood. "They're here." Sari didn't cry. She walked to the hidden shelter and looked at him. "You come too," she said. Jack shook his head. "Not yet. I need to slow them down." She hesitated. Her eyes filled with fear again, but not for herself, for him. He gently touched her shoulder. "I promise to protect you." She nodded once and stepped into the shelter. Jack sealed the door, covered it with a rug, and grabbed his old rifle. He moved outside into the snow. The air was still. Then came the first shadow. A tall figure with no face, dressed in dark armor, stepped out from the trees. It didn't speak. It didn't stop. Behind it came 2 more. Jack raised his voice. "She doesn't belong to you." One of them pointed a glowing stick toward him. "Return the asset." Jack fired a warning shot. The snow exploded near their feet. They moved fast, but Jack was ready. As they stepped forward, one of his traps snapped shut, slamming metal around the legs of the lead shadow. It fell hard, struggling. A light flare burst, blinding the others. Jack ran back, firing again. The second figure ducked and shot a stun beam. It missed. Inside the shelter, Sari heard the sounds. She covered her mouth, tears falling, but she didn't stay still. She grabbed a small metal pipe and slowly opened the shelter door. Outside, Jack was pushed down, his weapon sliding away. The third shadow aimed a weapon at him. Before it could fire, Sari appeared from behind and slammed the pipe into its leg. It screamed in a strange sound, turning just enough for Jack to punch it in the chest and grab his weapon. Together, they stood. Back to back. Sari held the pipe with shaking hands. The attackers regrouped. Two were still standing. They paused. Then one spoke again. "You will both be taken." Jack raised his weapon. "Not tonight." The fight for her freedom. Snow fell silently as Jack and Sari stood back to back, surrounded by shadows that moved like ghosts. The broken trees, the glowing traps, and the burning flares had slowed them, but not stopped them. The attackers were still here, and they wanted Sari. Jack's hands were steady, even with blood on his cheek. His old rifle was pointed forward, but he knew it wouldn't be enough. The enemy was better armed, but he had something they didn't, someone to fight for. Beside him, Sari held a metal pipe like it was a sword. Her arm shook, but she did not run. She did not cry. Not this time. The leader of the attackers took one step forward. Its face was covered in a black helmet, eyes glowing red. "This is your final chance," it said in a cold, empty voice. "Hand over the marked one." Jack didn't move. "Her name is Sari," he said. "And she's free." The figure raised its weapon. Suddenly, Sari moved. She darted forward, small and fast, and slammed the pipe into the weapon. It sparked and dropped. The attacker swung, but Jack was already behind it, knocking it down with a blast from his rifle. The two other figures charged, but they stepped into a net hidden under the snow. It snapped up around them, tangling their limbs. Sari grabbed Jack's hand, pulling him back toward the house. "More," she said breathlessly. "More will come." Jack nodded. "Then we make them regret it." Inside, they locked the doors and sealed the windows. Jack handed Sari a shock stick from his storage, small but powerful. "Hit hard," he said, "and don't stop." She held it tightly, her eyes fierce. Moments later, the shadows returned. One attacker broke through the wall with brute force. Jack shot at its legs, but it kept coming. Sari jumped forward and stabbed the shock stick into its side. The figure screamed and fell, twitching on the floor. Another climbed onto the roof, trying to break through from above. Jack grabbed his tool launcher and fired a bolt, knocking it down. It crashed into the snow below. Still more shadows appeared. From the trees, silent, endless. "They won't stop," Sari whispered. "They will take me." "No," Jack said firmly. "You're not going back." They fought for hours. Every time one attacker was stopped, another came. But Jack had prepared the land. Hidden wires sent blasts through the ground. Pressure plates dropped traps. The house became a maze of fire and metal. And Sari fought like she had waited her whole life for this moment. She didn't speak much, but every move she made was with purpose. She used speed, she used silence, and she used rage. The fear inside her had turned into fire. At one point, Jack was pushed down, his leg hurt and bleeding. An attacker raised its blade over him. Sari didn't think. She threw herself forward, tackling the shadow to the ground. It grabbed her arm, but she slammed her elbow into its face again and again. When it stopped moving, she rolled off, breathing hard. Jack looked up at her, amazed. "You're stronger than you think?" he said. She didn't smile. She just helped him up. As the sun began to rise, only two attackers remained. But something had changed. They were retreating. They moved slowly back into the trees, dragging their broken teammates behind them. One turned to speak. "This is not over," Jack limped forward. "It is for you." The ship above made a low hum and vanished into the clouds. Sari stood in the snow, her arm scratched, her lip bleeding. But she didn't fall. She stood tall. Jack stepped beside her. "You okay?" She nodded once. Then she whispered, "Free." That single word made Jack's heart ache. She had fought, not just to survive, but to live. To take back her life. As they walked back to the broken house, Jack looked at her and said, "We'll rebuild, stronger this time." Sari didn't answer, but she took his hand again, not because she was scared, but because she had chosen him. The fight was over for now, and she had won her freedom. Asterisk, her real name, and a new life. The house was quiet again, but it was no longer the same. The walls were broken, the windows shattered, and black marks from weapons scarred the floor. Yet, in the middle of the wreckage, something beautiful had taken root. Hope. Jack sat near the fire pit he had rebuilt, warming his hands. The snow outside had melted a little, and spring was finally coming to the cold planet. Birds had returned to the trees, and the wind no longer felt so cruel. But what brought the biggest change was not the season. It was Sari. She no longer hid when the wind howled. She no longer flinched when Jack opened the door or spoke her name. Her steps were stronger, her eyes brighter. The fear was still inside her, but it no longer controlled her. She had learned to live again. One morning, Jack brought her a gift, a small metal bracelet with smooth edges and no sharp symbols. It had her name carved in human language. "Sari," it read. When he gave it to her, she stared at it for a long time, then placed it on her wrist and hugged him gently. It was the first time she had shown such affection without hesitation. Later that day, as they sat together under the open sky, Jack pointed at the stars. "Do you want to go home?" "Someday," Sari was quiet. She looked up, then down at her bracelet. "My name," she said softly. "Not Sari." Jack turned to her, surprised. "What is your real name?" She took the notepad and slowly wrote a long, beautiful word. Letters Jack didn't understand, but when she spoke it out loud, it sounded like a song. Gentle and full of meaning. "Selari." She whispered. Jack repeated it carefully. "Selari." She smiled and nodded. "Sari was what they called me, not me." That moment felt like magic. For the first time, she had taken back her true self, her real name, the name they tried to erase. And now, she had shared it with someone she trusted. From that day forward, Jack called her Selari. They started building a new life together. He repaired the roof, and she planted small seeds in the garden. She liked to sit by the stream and sing in her own language, even if Jack couldn't understand the words. He never asked for a translation. It was enough to hear her voice. One evening, as the sky turned golden, Jack saw her standing by the signal post they had built from old metal parts. A small light blinked at the top, sending out a message into the stars. "Why do you keep it on?" he asked. She looked at him. "Others, like me," she said, "still waiting, still hurting." Jack nodded. He understood. She wanted to help others escape, like she had. To give them a second chance? "You want to fight them?" he asked gently. She shook her head. "No, I want to find them, hold their hands." "Like you did mine." Jack felt something deep in his chest. He had saved her, but now she would save others. That night, she added a second name to the signal. Under Selari, she wrote, "Daughter of Hope." Jack asked what it meant. She looked at him and said, "Because I did not die. I lived, and I will help others live too." The stars above were bright, but her eyes were brighter. In the end, she had come from the cold, naked, and broken. No name, no voice, no past worth holding on to. Now, she had a home, a name, a future, and the human who had once been a stranger was now her family. As they sat together, hands joined, watching the stars blink back, Jack whispered, "You came to me with nothing, but now you have everything." Silari looked up and whispered back, "No, you gave me everything." Their story didn't end with escape, that it began with healing, and from that healing a new journey would rise together.